We're back. That's right. Investigative committee time. So, just a little recap. Earlier this year, there was an article put up on Mirror Indy that Thomas Cook, who is Joe Hogsett's number two guy, former, allegedly was sexually harassing a couple of women, possibly more. And this basically set up this whole of changing the sexual harassment policy inside of city council, inside of state government, now, especially with Greg Taylor getting accused of sexual harassing women. Even he said, is like, hey, I made some mistakes. Seems like he did then. Greg Taylor, not Thomas Cook. So this committee meeting is about what could be done, what things could have been done differently with Thomas Cook and the handling of it, because the women that came forward said that, hey, Thomas Cook is kind of a freak and he's creepy, he's sexually harassing us, and they really didn't do anything about it. Whether it's HR, whether it's the city council, whether whoever is in charge of that whole thing. So now they're coming up with forms of how to do stuff. Now, personally, I was hoping that they were going to look into the handling of the Thomas Cook situation. Mostly because, then what the fuck are we doing here? What we should not be doing is having people that received money from Thomas Cook on this committee. Krista Carlino, Kristen Jones, Andy Nielsen, and I believe Jessica McCormick should be right over here, all received money from Thomas Cook, but yet they're still on the committee? Really? Seems like a conflict of interest, so much that Indy Spanglish, aka Jerry Lopez, talked about it on a radio show. And then a couple of days later, Brian Mowry brought it up in the last committee meeting. And basically the council, I think that's who she is, was like, we'll just have to let the firms figure it out and see if there is a conflict of interest. The people that received from money from Thomas Cook that are now on this committee, I don't think they should be on the committee, and I think any common sense person would agree with me. But anyway, let's get into it. It's an hour and a half. We're going to be here for a minute, so let's just do it.
Good evening. My name is Councilor Krista Carlino, and we are convening the Investigative Committee. It is Thursday, November 14th at 5:30 p.m. We are on the second floor of the City County Building in room 260, and we will begin tonight's meeting.
That is so many detailed stuff that I'm not even sure if that's needed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Josh Bain, District 21 on the southwest side.
I'm favorite counselor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Renee Allen, District 15.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Andy Nielsen, District 14, East Side.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kristen Jones, District 18.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We know that Leader Mowry is under the weather, and our thoughts are with him this evening.
What? Does Mowry have cancer? Or does he have the sniffles? Carlino is just the absolute worst. She's like top 3 people that I despise the most in that council.
Madam Chairwoman McCormick is running a little bit late, so we will hold space for her. And just before tonight's meeting, we were informed of an IMPD officer who sustained a gunshot wound, and I just wanted to hold a moment of silence to think about that officer and express our desire for his speedy recovery.
She is such a fake.
Thank you. There's only one item on tonight's agenda. We are joined by the Fisher Phillips team virtually. Yes, Council Pierce, forgive me.
I don't mean to interrupt, I apologize. I just want to introduce Amrit. Amrit is our expert in getting us all hooked up virtually, so he will be here for all of our virtual meetings.
Amrit from ISA?
Amrit from ISA.
Thank you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate you allowing us to have this hybrid meeting tonight. Are there any remarks you'd like to add?
Just for everyone's information, we are recording and transcribing this in a meeting.
Okay, transcribing the meeting as well. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
And make sure you use your microphones, because it won't. It sounds like it'll pick up, but it will not pick up on channel 16, and so we may not get it in the transcript.
Very good. Councilors, make sure you hit those buttons, and if the green light is illuminated on your microphones this evening. And we will welcome those individuals on the call. I believe we have Max and Danielle from the Fisher Phillips Law Firm. Good evening.
Okay.
We have the...
All right, hold on.
a slide deck of tonight's presentation before us, before the members of the committee here. And as chair,
I
I
might have
will
to
turn it
shrink
over
this.
to you all to introduce yourselves and jump right in.
Okay, you can't see it.
Everyone. Good evening.
All right, hold on, real quick. See, there's no reason why we can't have a camera right here. Oh, wait, right here. You mean when someone's talking, you should be able to see them, and then you should be able to see everybody else, but like much better, because there are a lot of things that happen that nobody can see while they're watching it with us. I know because I go to these things live. Whether they're picking their nose or eating food or goofing around on their phone, like those things should be recorded.
I am Danielle Kays, and I am joined by my colleague Max Bunker. We look forward to speaking with the investigative committee here today. I'll give you a
That's
little
not
bit
me,
of
by the
background
way.
on myself.
Okay.
I am a partner in our Chicago office of our law firm called Fisher Phillips. Fisher Phillips is an international law firm. We have about 43 offices throughout the U.S. And we're very pleased to be working with you on this matter. I am an employment litigator. I have been litigating
Pearl necklace, boys.
over the past 10 years for both private and public entities. I also conduct investigations for many different entities, ranging from large Fortune 100 companies to smaller businesses and public entities as well. The other part of my practice is that I defend privacy class actions and counsel on privacy matters as well. So thank you for allowing me to introduce myself. I will allow Max to introduce himself as well.
Good evening, Councilors. My name is Max Bunker. I'm an associate with Fisher Phillips. I too have a practice that's centered around employment litigation, but I also do a significant amount of investigative work. And have worked with both public and private entities in an investigatory sort of posture. Very excited to be here tonight and present in front of the panel, and we're both very much looking forward to contributing to the important work that this committee has been empowered to do. So thank you.
Great. Well, we will get started. So we are here to present to the Council in response to Resolution 41. In doing so, this is our first step of our objectives. And today we plan to do 3 things. Actually, Max, can you share the PowerPoint, please?
Amrit, I think you need to, can you authorize me as a user or presenter?
Max, you can go ahead now. Can you do that now?
Yeah, let me.
Oh no. Technology. Oh no.
Alright. Visible?
I think, can you put it in the slideshow mode? Right now it's showing the next slide and it doesn't have a full view.
Do your job. Whoopsie. Technology, am I right?
Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Yeah, don't worry. We're just sitting here, not doing shit, wasting our tax money.
Same issue.
It is. We can go ahead and get started.
Yeah,
with
let's
this
just get
if
it
that's the
going
case.
because we're, so we got
We've
got
only
things to
one more
do.
minute to try to.
Does that work?
Here we go. Yep, all set. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so here, as I mentioned, we plan to do 3 main things. First, we thought it was important for us to discuss workplace harassment. There's obviously many things that are encompassed within workplace harassment, and it's ever-changing, especially in today's modern world. So we're going to discuss what workplace harassment is, explain the law, explain what it entails, and discuss the challenges of sexual harassment claims for modern employers and public employers. Then we're going to discuss the roles and duties for public employers and the responsibilities. We can go to the next slide. All right, to start our discussion about workplace harassment and discrimination in general, we want to start with an understanding of who is protected from harassment. So what we'll do today for our first step is to talk about what legally protected classes are, and then we'll talk about the laws and the agencies that apply specifically at the federal, state, and local level, and as applied specifically to Indianapolis and my county. Next slide, please. So what is a protected class? This is going to cover who is protected from harassment under the law. So to back up a little bit, we want to say not all harassment is unlawful. There are federal, state,
Wait a minute, you don't say.
and local harassment laws that a company and a person have to fall within for protection. First of all, race is probably one of the primary ones that people are aware of. That's likely self-explanatory. You cannot treat someone differently or adversely or harass them because of their race.
Don't tell that to the Democrat Party.
Many laws protect the individual also not because of their race, but also the color of your skin.
Again, don't tell that to the Democrat Party.
Not just against a minority population, but can be against, it can protect the majority population. We also have religion. This protected class encompasses religious beliefs, practices, and observations. Next one is sex, and that is what we're going to be talking about a lot today. Sex includes
Wait.
now pregnancy, childbirth, related conditions from pregnancy or childbirth, sexual orientation, and gender identity. National origin is also a protected class. Age is a protected class. So the prior protected classes that I just mentioned, those are largely protected under Title VII federal law. Again, state and local laws also protect those classes. Age applies to individuals who are over 40, and that is enforced by the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, also known as the ADEA, which is the federal law. Again, age is something that is also enforced and protected under the state and local laws. Age is not a protected class for individuals who are under 40 or people who claim that they were discriminated or harassed because they were too young.
Hold on. Wait. What'd you say?
A protected class for individuals who are under 40 or people who claim that they were discriminated or harassed because they were too young.
Oh man, you should go to a job site.
Disability is a physical or a mental impairment that substantially limits a person's ability to perform major life activities. So there is the Americans with Disability Act, also known as the ADA, and that protects disability. Also, it's important to note that whether a person is disabled or not, if a company or an entity or a supervisor or manager believes that person is disabled and they treat them differently because they believe they have a disability, that also is protected under the law. And as I mentioned too, we talked about sexual orientation, pregnancy, gender identity. Sometimes that falls under sex. I don't think I mentioned earlier, familial status. All right, we can go to the next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about the government agencies that investigate and enforce the protection of those classes we just mentioned. They exist starting at the federal level. There's also state level and a local level in many cases. So here we're going to talk about the federal level. As I mentioned, discrimination, harassment, and retaliation are regulated at the federal level by a few key laws. The main three are Title VII, as we mentioned earlier, race, sex, color, religion, and national origin, Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, and the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. The federal agency that oversees these laws prior to litigation is called the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, also known as the EEOC. So let's talk about the process for EEOC investigation just for background. What first happens is that if an individual believes they have been discriminated against they will contact the EEOC and file a charge. In that charge, they provide information on why they believe they've been discriminated against or harassed or retaliated against. Very important is that they have to file that charge within 180 days of the discriminatory act. So if someone was harassed, they have to file the charge within 180 days of that harassment. If someone was terminated and they believe it was because of one of their protected classes, they have to file the charge within 180 days of that termination. Now note, there is an exception for if something that is a continuing violation. And what that means is that the person claims that the conduct they were subject to wasn't just a singular, discrete act that happened on one day, but instead it spanned over a period of time. For example, ongoing harassment. So if somebody is subject to a continuing violation or was subject to continued harassment that lasted for whatever period of time, it could have been a year, months, whatever it is, you only need to file the charge within 180 days of that end date, but the whole continuing violation can be subject to the allegations by the charging party. All right, once the charge is filed, and if it's timely, the EEOC will get it, and they will speak with the person who filed it. Typically, the person who files a charge is called a charging party. The EEOC will speak with them. They'll figure out kind of a little bit more detail about the claims that they're making, and then they will investigate. The next step of that investigation is they will notify the entity who is being accused of the discrimination or retaliation, and they will ask that company or public entity who's being accused to provide a written response to the claims that are in that charge. This written response is called a position statement. Once that position statement is provided, there's a few different courses that the EEOC can take. Sometimes they will follow up and ask the parties to provide additional information in writing. Sometimes the EEOC will interview witnesses or ask for documents. Other times they will complete their investigation after they see what is provided by the responding party or the employer.
So what happens if the complaint, say a woman makes a complaint against an employee, say sexual harassment, since that's what we're here for anyway, and then come to find out everything was totally fake. Everything was just inflated, so to speak. What happens to that person? Because I don't know if you guys pay attention to this kind of stuff, but I do. Earlier this year, there was a woman that said that this guy raped her. And then come to find out, she was lying. She said that she was raped, and then she left, and then the cops showed up after she made the complaint, and then the guy had cameras everywhere and was able to prove nothing happened. They didn't even have sex. Yeah. But that lady's going to walk free, and this guy's life could have been destroyed if he didn't have all the proof on it. That's all I'm saying. If you're going to say this happened, then you should have proof on it. And if you are lying, you're trying to ruin somebody's life, then what the hell? That's all I'm saying. And that is called common sense.
The EEOC makes a determination. And that determination is whether there is or isn't cause to believe that there was a violation of a law that the EEOC enforces. If, on the one hand, there isn't cause, what they will do is they will issue a letter to the charging party saying that they have not found a cause for violation, and they direct the charging party that they can file a private lawsuit in courts, can be state or federal court, and they have to do so within 90 days of receiving that letter. That 90-day period or deadline is very strict, and it's set forth in that letter that is the deadline. The other alternative,
I'm really hoping someone will ask that question.
You may find that there has been cause to believe there was a violation of one of their laws that they enforce. When that happens, the EEOC is obligated to try to conciliate with the responding company. What that means is typically it's similar to a settlement. They will try to negotiate and demand and negotiate with the responding entity for wages for the charging party. Sometimes often they ask for policy changes, training to various individuals within the responding party. And sometimes, they will also include, depending on the circumstance, an agreement that the employer will change some aspect of the charging party's terms of employment or some aspect of employment that relates to the allegations that were made. Like the last option that could happen, although this happens in more limited circumstances, is that the EEOC could file a lawsuit on their own behalf for the individual charging party if they find cause. Or they might file it on behalf of a class of individuals. All right, next slide, and I'll turn it over to Max to talk a little bit more about the other agencies.
Thanks, Danielle. So like Danielle explained, there is some overlap in enforcement powers between government agencies at different levels, much like enforcement of other types of laws, law enforcement, environmental regulations, where you have a federal level EPA and a state level EPA. Enforcement of employment statutes is handled by the EEOC, and then Indiana has its own independent employment commission that investigates allegations of discrimination and harassment. It's a creature of the Indiana Civil Rights Act, which tracks pretty closely with Title VII Civil Rights Act at the federal level. But there are some differences at the state level that we need to go through. At some differences in terms of investigatory power, and then also just the practice of how these investigations are handled. So the first kind of major difference is the timeline is a little bit shortened to file a claim with the Indiana Commission.
Imagine sitting in that room and then having to listen to all this crap.
And that's unless, of course, there's an ongoing violation like Danielle explained, and then the same extended timeline will apply there as well. The Indiana Commission does have what's called a work share agreement with the EEOC. What that means is that those two agencies will just agree to share materials and will often adopt the outcome of an investigation depending on whose investigation concludes first. That's just largely for efficiency purposes, so that there's not multiple agencies at different levels of government investigating the same conduct and having different findings or reaching different conclusions about the same allegations. But they'll share materials and often investigation notes and things like that. Otherwise, the investigatory process at the commission level is relatively the same. They're still able to conduct interviews and do the same investigatory things that the EEOC is and that Danielle just explained. The investigator will, at the conclusion of that investigation, make a determination as to the veracity of the allegations, and then they'll issue a notice to the parties about the determination. If there's a no cause finding, either meaning that if they haven't found sufficient proof that the harassment or the discrimination actually did take place, then they'll issue the same sort of right to sue letter, which allows the charging party to file a lawsuit, in this case in state court, in the circuit court for the county or the jurisdiction in which that person lives within the state of Indiana. If the commission does find adequate evidence of discrimination or harassment, they will hold a public hearing and then issue a final order with a resolution, an appropriate resolution to resolve the allegations and the claim. If the parties wish, they can request to have the claims decided by a court. It's not a jury trial, it's just a judge looking at the claims, all of the evidence that's been acquired up to that point through the investigatory process, and then making a determination that the parties are then bound by. And that can include various forms of civil damages, injunctive relief, so an order entered that says, the parties have to do X, Y, and Z with respect to the charging party's employment. Different forms of relief are entered in that way. The party against whom the order is entered does have some recourse afterwards. They can file within 30 days an appeal to the Indiana Court of Appeals, just seeking review of the commission's decision or the judge's decision in the event that the parties want to go that route. And then at the local level, the Indiana Civil Rights Act creates a local agency, the ability for a municipality to have its own local agency that carries out a lot of the same functions, but just at the local level. The benefit of that sometimes can be that the Indiana Commission or even the EEOC, the resources can be stretched thin. They get a lot of complaints. They have a lot of investigatory work to handle. And so the investigatory process can sometimes drag out, and that can slow the process of a charging party getting recourse for their claim. And so some parties do, prefer to have a local option that is empowered to investigate claims of discrimination and harassment and enact appropriate relief. And so at the local level, it's the same sort of timeline. The commissions are just local commissions. They often work together with the Indiana Civil Rights Commission at the state level in investigating claims. They share materials in a similar way to the work share agreement that the EEOC and the Indiana Commission have. And they can even transfer complaints back and forth and determine that way who's the proper entity to investigate the claims. So it's just a more localized process for investigating claims of discrimination and harassment under the state statute. Some of these local agencies will be set up differently depending on the relevant municipal ordinance or municipal code, and then might have slightly different procedures on that basis for how they handle investigations and how they impose relief following the conclusion of that investigation. As a general rule, once a local agency commission makes a determination, that decision can be appealed to a local agency commission and have a judicial review take place that way. So there's the same sort of recourse again for a party that feels like the order that's been imposed is inappropriate. And that then begs the question, what the local agency equivalent is for Indianapolis, Marion County, and the city county does, per the meaning of municipal code, have its own local agency equivalent. It's under Title III, Chapter 581, which refers to human relations and equal opportunity. It's known as the Office of Equal Opportunity, and pursuant to the municipal code, it's housed within the Corporation Counsel's office, and it has the ability to exercise powers that are granted to it by statute. And so similar to the other local commissions, it can investigate and impose relief for state-level violations of the Indiana Civil Rights Act. But then it also has certain powers that are either granted to it through the ordinance, through the municipal code, or that are delegated by the mayor. And all of that is sort of laid out in the municipal statute, granted certain powers, this Office of Equal Opportunity to conduct investigations. As a general rule, under the code, were the Office of Equal Opportunity to investigate a city employee or a county employee, the county employee would have to go through the human resources procedures and sort of exhaust their remedies that way by going through a process very similar to the one that the council's heard about from HR Director Tornalis prior to filing any kind of complaint.
That's what I thought. Don't you have a whole department for that already?
By the Office of Equal Opportunity. A little bit about the structure of the office. It is run by, or led rather, by an administrator, and that is a mayoral appointee. And sort of pursuant to the statute, it does a lot of the same functions as other local agencies and investigates harassment and discrimination externally through the receipt of complaints and has many of the same powers as the local agencies, and is also authorized by statute to review internal city, county human resources policies and procedures, just to determine whether they're complying at all times with any relevant federal, state, or local laws concerning harassment, discrimination, and that the processes are being appropriately followed. It's mainly used, again, as a local agency commission, and as part of that process, again, the investigatory process for reviewing complaints and making determinations is similar to the ones that we've heard about in other contexts here. So it investigates complaints under rules that are established by the administrator who's in charge of the office. It can use conciliation between the parties in an effort to resolve the disputes. The administrator can use discovery methods and interrogatories, document requests, just in an effort to get additional information that they can then use in making the ultimate determination. The timeline for the OEO is a little bit shorter than at the state level and at the federal level as well, in terms of the time that the investigation needs to be completed by statute. It says that it needs to be completed within 100 days. There is an opportunity and an exception to that, in that the parties can agree to extend that process, or given certain circumstances, that process can be extended depending on how involved the investigation will ultimately be and how much work the OEO will have to perform in investigating certain claims. Once the investigation process is complete, the administrator will compile a report, along with other members of the office, just taking all the investigatory material that was just compiled, and then present that report to an advisement panel, which is made up of 3 members of the Equal Opportunity Advisement Board. Now that's just the sort of overarching entity over the Office of Equal Opportunity. It's also a product of the municipal code. It's a 14-member board that's made up of 8 mayoral appointees and 6 members who are appointed by the city council.
Jeez, that's a lot of people.
They're basically just responsible for sort of overseeing the office and ensuring that it's complying with all the goals that are stated under the code.
Yeah, we investigated ourselves and found nothing.
Then goes to an advisement panel that's made up of 3 members of this board, and they are then the ones who make a determination about how to handle that complaint. And what that process looks like is the panel will consider all the available materials that have been compiled over the course of the investigation, all the documents that have been submitted, all the investigatory materials that the investigator has put together, and then they'll make a determination as to whether cause exists to believe a discriminatory practice has occurred in violation of the local ordinance. And if it is the case that a violation is found to have occurred, then the panel can, similar to other local agencies, use conciliation to try to resolve, to try to bring about a resolution that will work for the parties, or they can refer the case to an adjudication committee or set it up for a public hearing, and then the determination will be made at that point. And the hearing just involves additional sort of presentment of materials that have been compiled up to that point in the process, and at which point a neutral will make a determination about how to appropriately handle the violation of the relevant ordinance. And again, it's the same general relief is often available in these cases, whether it's a monetary penalty or injunctive relief that basically tells the offending party that they need to do something. And so that's sort of, again, what that process looks like. that decision can be appealed by the offending party as well. It's appealed to the larger Equal Opportunity Advisory Board in the event that the party that a determination is made against finds that it's inappropriate, given the circumstances. So that's a little bit of an overview of what the various investigatory offices look like for harassment and discrimination complaints at the federal, at the state, and at the local level. And I'm going to turn it back over to Danielle, who's going to just talk briefly about some statistics with respect to the OEO specifically.
So here we have a chart that shows just the sheer number of discrimination complaints that were filed with the OEO for a period of time. This chart shows 2009 through 2016, and then we have a next chart, which we'll show in a minute, for the period 2017 through 22. As you
So
can
they
see,
have been going down, but man, that is
variety
from
of
like
charges that I've brought.
8 years ago.
That's probably part of a larger discussion to talk about, why, and each year has different things that affect the number of charges. But you can see that in 2009, there were 90 charges, and that fluctuated quite a bit up until 2016. There's various things that affect this. The laws change, the way the individuals are able to file their charges, whether in person or online, affects things. The political environments, the social environments, all of those things affect the number of charges that are filed. And also, I would say that probably, how the federal or state government is processing their charges affects how, many charges are filed with the OEO instead. So here, again, we see that at the end of 2016, it was just above 30 charges. Max, you can go to the next one. Here we have the range of charges for 2017 through 2022. I will note, too, that, of course, these charts show the various charges that occurred in, for places of public accommodation and housing. The orange line is what we're looking at for employment discrimination and retaliation charges themselves for both of these past charts. But here you see that since 2017, the OEO has handled much fewer charges than they did in the prior years.
Wait, what?
So for example, starting in 2016, it says that there were 8 charges, and at the end of 2022, looks like it's about 16.
Well, see, this would actually make sense because COVID shut everything down. I think you probably saw a decrease in it, and then when everybody went back to work, they started going up. No surprise there.
Give or take a few. This is a much lower volume than the EEOC, and we don't have the statistics for the state agency, but I would guarantee it's a lower range of volume than the state agency as well. Just as an example, for comparison, the EEOC typically, over the past 5 years that they've reported, have handled between 60 to 70,000 charges. I think in 2016, maybe it was up to 90,000 charges. And we have one more year of data than the OEO. And in 2023, it showed that charges increased about 20% that year. One of the most predictable reasons is because, many places, many employers were allowing people to work remotely during the pandemic. People weren't encountering their coworkers as much. They weren't physically seeing them. And I would say, 2022, 2023, there was definitely an increase in employees going back to work, and that's kind of maybe why the numbers went up around that time and dipped a little bit after 2020. I'll turn it back to Max to talk about federal law, which we're going to get into.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. So kind of the major reason why we're here and why we've been retained to look into this situation is a discussion of sexual harassment. And before we get into what sexual harassment looks like and some of the various factors for determining whether it's taken place, it's kind of important to note what the sort of historical framework is surrounding federal recognition of sexual harassment as a protected, and protected activity under Title VII. So, for any history buffs, the Civil Rights Act when it was first passed, was primarily concerned with race-based discrimination, sort of following and in the middle of the civil rights movement in the early 1960s. It wasn't until 1980 that the EEOC officially recognized sexual harassment in the workplace as a form of discrimination in violation of Title VII, and sort of established guidelines that employers and public or private, could use to determine whether sexual harassment had taken place in violation of that statute. And then in the years that followed, and even up till today, the federal law has developed somewhat, and it continues to change. Some of the factors for determining whether sexual harassment has taken place have changed. And you'll see on this slide, there's a couple of notable court cases that have set some standards for certain areas of the sexual harassment case law. One is America Savings Bank, which just talks about severe and pervasive conduct, and Danielle, again, will get into the specifics of what that means and what that looks like. And then Burlington Industries is another big one, and that basically stands for the proposition that employers are liable for sexual harassment that is committed by one of their employees, but if they promptly investigate the allegations of sexual harassment and seek to prevent some kind of future harassment, that is a valid defense to a sexual harassment claim against an employer. So it just sort of underscores the importance for employers to take sort of prompt corrective action in the face of allegations of sexual harassment in the workplace. And again, over time, there's been sort of an expansion.
What's in the background? Who was that?
Constitutes sexual harassment in the workplace. And so Danielle is now going to go through what sexual harassment actually looks like and how we can identify it. And
Yes, let's talk about sexual harassment.
Try to limit the threat of sexual harassment in the workplace.
All right, so here we are. We are going to talk about the law and discuss types of sexual harassment, and then talk about the challenges for public employers. We can go to the next slide, please. Okay, what is unlawful sexual harassment? There are three main elements of sexual harassment we have them listed here. Unwelcome conduct. Number two, it is based on sex. And number three, one of two forms of conduct. Either quid pro, I'm sorry, is there a question? Okay. Either quid pro quo harassment or a hostile work environment. And here you can see what these two kinds of conduct, how they're described. So let's start with quid pro quo. It's enduring conduct that becomes a condition of continued employment, or hostile work environment requires severe and pervasive conduct that is enough to create a work environment that is abusive, hostile, intimidating, according to a reasonable person. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, Max, let's go back if you can. So let's break that down a little bit first. So unwelcome conduct. This means that conduct that is invited or is mutual is not generally unlawful harassment. It must be something that the individual who is accusing or is feels as a victim of harassment did not welcome, did not solicit, did not request. Based on sex. This is, it sounds very clear, but especially as we continue in a modern world, there's a lot of behavior that is arguably common workplace behavior or common workplace disputes.
Like
they
what?
may be harassing in someone's view, but it's not based on sex or another protected class. So sometimes, people will say, well, I'm being held to performance expectations that aren't reasonable, aren't fair. That's something that, would not at first glance be based on sex. So that is a requirement to allege sexual harassment. The conduct has to be related to sex.
Wait a minute. Making sure you do your work is sexual harassment? Or is it like depending? Is like, if the guy doesn't have to do his work, but the girl does, or vice versa?
Then, as we mentioned, there's two types of harassment. Quid pro quo and hostile work environment.
You should go to a job site if you want to see a hostile.
Okay, quid pro quo. What that means is this for that. This for that harassment is typically best demonstrated by some examples. So for example, we have them listed here, but a manager offers a promotion to an employee in exchange for a date. They will not give that promotion if they are rejected. Another example is if a supervisor threatens to fire an employee if they don't agree to sexual advances. If a manager alters an employee's performance evaluation based on their willingness to engage in sexual acts.
There's like lobbyists.
Another example is if an employer terminates an employee because they refuse to comply with sexual demands, or terminates them.
You know what they say, either put up or shut up.
Harassment. Again, quid pro quo harassment can also include other protected characteristics such as religion, etc. Of course, we're focusing on sexual harassment here today. If that is not the conduct, there is another form of recognized conduct for sexual harassment, and this is the more common one, known as a hostile work environment. It's not this for that conduct, but instead it means that someone is subject to comments, behavior, again, that we said, have to rise to the level of being severe or pervasive. And a reasonable person has to consider them so hostile that they alter the work environment. The reasonable person standard is important under the law. Of course, how that's treated in the workplace can be different. This is a very fact-intensive inquiry, and what it means really truly varies from case to case. And as lawyers sitting here today, you know, two sides of the aisle, two sides of a lawsuit will argue, you know, different things based on different facts.
This is why blue-collar companies don't really have HR departments, because of this stuff. Name-calling, insults, criticism being a hostile work environment. This is why nothing ever gets done. This is why Gen Z is going to put us into the dark ages, and these assholes are too. Oh God, you're criticizing my work. Hostile work environment. Lawsuit. Oh God, I fucking despise these people.
So we here are talking about, we've talked about quid pro quo conduct that's verbal. Hostile work environment with respect to verbal behavior includes name calling, of course, insults, saying offensive jokes, spreading inappropriate gossip or lies related to a sex or because of someone's sex.
That's
making
it?
sounds, making threats, it could be a cat call, again, based on sex or whatever protected class is being alleged. Next slide, please. Other type of harassment
here we go.
physical behavior, hugging. You know, I will tell you that, you know, giving someone a hug hello can be physical behavior that could amount to harassment.
Hug from
Kissing,
behind.
Any sort of touching, pitching, patting, holding,
Good game.
massages, leaning over, cornering someone, blocking someone's movements, you know, in an unwelcome way, exposing someone's self, obscene gestures, and sexual assaults like rape, battery.
Yeah,
or
you know, I
attempted
feel,
acts.
you know, pretty sure like this bottom one, yeah, we already know that. Physical, what the shit.
Next slide. Harassment can also come in the form of visual items. There were some very notable cases in the 80s and 90s about pinup calendars, so photographs, videos, cartoons, physical toys or props in the workplace, notes, writings left on whiteboards or walls, photographs drawn on whiteboards or walls, staring. These are all things that can form visual behavior that could be a part of sexual harassment. Next slide, please. So those that we mentioned were, in the past, the most common forms of harassment behavior. As we know, living in this modern world, things have truly evolved over the years, and so has harassing behavior. We are in a new landscape, And it's really important that employers be careful of a number of other aspects where harassment can come into play. So for example, we're going to talk about cyber harassment, artificial intelligence used to harass, expansion of the workplace. As we all know, again, workplaces are now entail remote work, and constitutional issues. Next slide, please. Okay, so first we discuss cyber harassment. The biggest area where this comes into play is social media. That's also come into play in text messages, emoji use, emails, of course.
Wait, emojis? Really? Oh, man, just end it all.
And as the world and technology continue to change, we can very quickly anticipate that there will be new methods, new technology, and new types of platforms
AI.
where cyber harassment can take place.
Hell yeah.
The
Just
risk
kidding.
here for a public entity is the employee's ability to engage in free speech. Harassing speech is not always free speech, so it is a very fact-intensive and legal inquiry. And it's important that employees of public entities be aware of the responsibility for compliance and how to understand how to navigate cyber harassment without infringing on constitutional rights. Next slide, please. AI, like the social media and other platforms that we just mentioned, AI can be used to harass individuals. This can include creating realistic but fabricated images or videos of someone engaging in inappropriate behavior, whether the victim or someone else, using chatbots to send harassing messages, manipulating other existing content to create false narrative about an individual. So these are all things that need to be flagged if they're raised. And employers really have to be extremely careful to make sure to authenticate any AI that is complained about by an individual. Doing that can be very, very difficult. It's hard to trace the source for AI, tracing the origin, and then also, given the complex nature of online platforms and algorithms, tracing can be very difficult on top of that. So it's just a reminder that for especially public employers, there's a challenge to make sure to provide a fair investigation and be cautious of due process if AI is involved in the allegations of harassment. Next slide, please. As we mentioned, there's an expansion of the workplace. Many employees work remotely. And, given that, where does the workplace end? So it's very important for public and private entities to be aware of how to define the workplace, be particular about that, and be careful of extending the workplace beyond what is fair and just. Next slide, please. Now, Max mentioned reporting obligations and how under the law, if things aren't reported to a manager or supervisor, a company can't be expected to know what's going on if it's not reported to them. If once it is reported, the law provides a defense to a company if they look into the complaints in a quick manner, and they investigate it and resolve it as necessary. However, there are higher expectations for supervisors and managers. Supervisors and managers are held to a higher standard of behavior.
You hear that, Greg Taylor? You hear that, Thomas Cook? Allegedly?
Or harassment that's shared with them, or harassment that is reported to them. They are not allowed under the law to just turn a blind eye, otherwise that can result in employer liability. And if
Mike
they should have
Wazowski.
known about harassment, they need to report it. They also are expected to model appropriate behavior. All this said, if a supervisor or a manager learns of a complaint of harassment, number one, they must report it. Supervisors and managers could be subject to discipline for failing to report it, and they must not engage in retaliation for the reports. I'll turn it back over to Max.
All right. We've been giving you a lot of information about what harassment looks like and what the relevant laws are that govern harassment and who is responsible and what the solutions are. And we want to kind of bring it back to that because ultimately, that's what the goal is of this committee and of this endeavor is trying to figure out what the best and most effective way is to channel the law and channel best practices into productive solutions for the city-county government system. So we're just going to briefly sort of go over some broad themes surrounding employment law and public employers and the sort of preferences that the law creates. So Indiana law reflects sort of a strong preference for public employers to remedy employment disputes related to discrimination and harassment at the lowest level. What that means is that the party sort of closest to the alleged conduct is often the best positioned to investigate that conduct and then remedy it in an effective way. So the way that plays out in practice is that typically the Human Resources Department is sort of the first line of defense, so to speak, in any effective human resources sort of investigatory process for harassment and discrimination complaints. They have the most institutional knowledge for the most part. They're generally aware of all the different agencies that they're dealing with. They may know people within those departments and be able to get information that an outside party coming in might not be able to. Though of course some of these agencies do thorough investigations and are able to also uncover significant facts. It's just that it can take longer and be a little bit of a more of an involved process. And so that's just generally speaking, an important takeaway is just knowing that that the goal is always to solve problems related to discrimination and harassment at sort of the lowest level, and that's why you have the municipal code and it delegates authority to the Office of Equal Opportunity to perform certain functions, and it similarly delegates responsibility to human resources for different functions and equally important. And so the Human Resources Division, of course, is responsible for promulgating policies and procedures and making sure that those are not in conflict in any way with the laws that we just went over, to make sure that ultimately employees of the city-county government are working in a safe workplace that is fully compliant with any applicable law. And then, the Office of Equal Opportunity exists under the municipal code to investigate in instances where a complaining party feels like the law has not been complied with. And the council heard it at its inaugural meeting from the Human Resources Director.
Dude, it's literally not even that hard. That's what I don't understand.
Of the actual details of the investigatory
don't touch Hey, let me tell you what. Hey, fellas and ladies, keep your hands to yourself. Don't say anything explicit. Just keep it about work. That's it. Go to work, do your job. That's all you have to do. Why is that so hard, you freaks? I don't understand it at all. It just blows my mind that this is even a thing. But hey, you know what? I don't know. Maybe because I'm such an adult and I don't shit where I eat. Maybe I'm the only person. That's why.
Themselves, because you've heard all about that, and we've just reviewed it ourselves, and are still in the process of determining more information. But we just wanted to highlight the fact that, of course, the City County Human Resources Department does have a workplace harassment policy that defines harassment and discrimination according to the statutes that we just presented on, and that creates internal policies and procedures that the council heard about for handling complaints related to harassment And it also sort of discusses the process for implementing corrective action, which again, you heard a presentation on, and contains a sort of broad confidentiality provision, which again is an important part of any human resources process in that victims of sexual harassment need a safe way to confidentially report conduct that might be harmful to them or others in their workplace. And so we have one
Just
more
keep the willy in the pants. That's all you got to do. And women, knock it off too. I've heard stories. I've actually seen it too. Everybody forgets about this. Like, I've seen Thomas Cook in action before. I was at a city council meeting, and there are people that still work in the Hawkstead administration that were flirting with Thomas Cook as well. I was sitting literally right behind him. I knew who it was, and Brian Bowery even, like, I think he was talking shit to Thomas Cook as well. It was kind of funny. I was just like, I think at the time I even said, it's like, this guy needs to shut the fuck up. He's talking too much, and he keeps flirting with these women. And to be fair, the women were kind of flirting with him back.
Included that whole provision that's in the policy.
He still doesn't get a pass,
slide.
by the way.
But I will note that in any case, whether it's a public entity or private, total confidentiality is usually unlikely. It's not always possible. In order to effectively investigate and respond to complaints, those who need to know, will typically learn of individuals who have complained, but keeping it as confidential as possible and involving, those who need to know as a limit is typically the goal, and what is, I think what's within the policy as well. All right, so next we want to just talk about the next steps for the investigation, or the investigative committee for building its responsibility under the resolution and those steps that we're taking. Next slide, please. So we are in phase one.
All right, this is probably the part that we have to focus on the most.
Today we've provided an overview of harassment law, discussing roles and responsibilities, and had an initial discussion about those roles and responsibilities. The next step in this phase, which we are already beginning, is to evaluate current internal roles of the OEO, OCC, and HR division with respect to the law, the ordinance. Then we will be looking at the efficacy of the human resources structure and how to maximize effectiveness and remedial powers for internal conflicts, but also keeping within the spirit of the Illinois Civil Rights Act to address issues at the lowest level possible. Next slide, please. Phase two. Phase two will come next, where we will look at the response that was taken to harassment allegations allegedly made by individuals employed by the administration and the campaign. We will take a look at the compliance with federal, state, and local rights, statutes, and ordinances with that response, and analyze internal procedures and how they may impact legal compliance. Next slide. Last phase, phase three, is we propose preparing a report with recommendations for the investigative committee to review and consider, to appear before the investigative committee to review and report our recommendations and provide any additional support that may be requested or identified by the council and the OCC. So those are our goals. That's, we're at the beginning of that phase one, quickly moving forward. And we are complete with our presentation and happy to take any, follow-up questions from the councilors. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Max. That was a thorough presentation. I know my colleagues and I probably have taken copious notes and have lots of questions. And so I do want to open it up for any questions or discussions of the committee at this time. Councilor Nielsen.
Oh, that was gross. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yes, thank you, Fisher Phillips team. I have a couple questions, but can ping back and forth as the chairwoman sees fit. First, I wanted to pull back to the process, which an employee makes a complaint, makes that complaint with the agency or department, in our case HR. Does that have to occur and be settled before it moves to OEO? Maybe that's also a question for our council as well. Or can those, like what occurs if you make a complaint to HR? When can you then move on to either an appeal or a complaint to the OEO? Is that no?
The spirit of the law requires that the low, sorry, would you like me to handle that?
Oh,
or did anybody else want to?
Please go ahead and jump on in.
Sure. So the spirit of the law requires that it be handled externally first. And when I say require, there is some gray area there. There can be if someone believes that it isn't being handled appropriately, but they tried, that is when they would go to OEO at that time. But the best practice is for it to be handled with HR first, and then take it to the agency at that level. And I can't say we are investigating further. We can only tell you kind of what the law says at this time, but that is the extent of our response without some further review and investigation.
Great, thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Continue.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely,
So something, I know you've reviewed Proposal 287, now Resolution 41, I should note that. And something that I was really proud to, that our councilors agreed to in this language was establishing in our final, one of our
Holy
final
shit. Get to it.
clauses in the preamble, that we agree with longstanding human resources best practices that a consensual sexual or romantic relationship can never exist between a supervisor and a subordinate due to imbalance in power in the workplace. And so I know that that is a best practice that is readily available on Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM, as we've probably heard of. But can you talk about if it exists at any level in your analysis and expertise that agrees with that best practice? Does the EEOC cover this issue of whether a consensual relationship can exist or not, or Indiana code? Like, what's your analysis of that position as it relates to state and federal code?
Yeah, so it's not specifically addressed in the statute or in a code. The way it's addressed is in EEOC opinions, determinations, and if things are litigated in the courtroom under law. I will say that every single harassment case is very fact intensive. So it is going to vary from case to case. There are circumstances where parties may believe it was consensual, but it was not. There are circumstances where people may say they didn't feel they had a choice. So it is.
Like the Thomas Cook thing. Okay.
The provision, the preamble that you cited, that is something that many entities, place in their workplace rules and enforce internally. And whether that is brought up with the EEOC or other agencies, just varies from case to case, and how it's applied varies from case to case as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Councilor Nielsen. Other comments or questions from councilors?
That's just a long-winded answer just to say it depends.
Councilor Bain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So going back to the Office of Equal Opportunity, I imagine many other, like probably every municipality has some sort of office like this. Might go under a different name, but do you all find that it's standard practice and that it's appropriate for the administrator of that office to be appointed by the mayor or the municipal executive?
I think that that's, again, a part of a factual inquiry, and we can't just opine on that broadly. We'd have to have more information. And, if it's relevant to the circumstances here, we have not begun our investigation just yet. We are in the process of doing that. And again, I said we are prepared I should say doing so now quickly. But it's too hard to opine on that at this point without having further information.
Okay. Appreciate that, and I think that would probably be the same answer you give to a few other questions I have, so I'll probably hold those until we meet again.
Thank you, Councilor.
I don't know obviously if this is where his line of thinking is like, oh boy, if the mayor knew that this was going on and then the mayor also appoints the head of this department, it doesn't seem like that's going to be a good idea. That would be my guess if that's where he's going at it.
Comments or questions from councilors?
He's got like 20-something minutes left. What happened?
Chairwoman McCormick.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I want to piggyback off Councilor Bain, just so I have an understanding of that hierarchy when it comes to the OEO. So the administrator is appointed by the mayor, and then that administrator gets to pick who is on the board that looks at the investigation. Is that correct? So I'm looking at the slides. So I'm just saying, no?
No, Madam Chair.
I believe. Hold on. You chill out. Hold on. Let's see if I'm right about it. Let's see if I remembered this. So the administrator is appointed by the mayor, and then the people on the board are appointed by the city. Some are appointed by the mayor, and some are appointed by the city council.
There are 14 members on that committee. 8 are mayoral appointments, and 6 are appointed by the city county council. Is that correct?
Right, but only 3 are.
Hey! That's touching. That's sexual harassment. It was in the slide. Hey, you can't touch her.
The advisement panel.
And so I'm just thinking, kind of piggybacking off, like if we have someone who is not in good faith doing things, they're picking who is also working with them. And I think that might be an area of investigation, right? Like a area to look at, like the way the hierarchy and the process is set up. Like
I think that's probably where Josh Bain was going.
Because if we have one bad actor, right, and we're trying to set this to no matter who is in that seat. So whoever's in that seat gets to pick the people who are also reviewing that investigation with them. And so that just seems like there's a lot of opportunity for
Bias.
Huh?
Bias.
Bias. Like, we'll just go with that word. Yeah. So that's more of a statement.
Carlino is mean mugging the shit out of McCormick.
That might be something that we could look into.
So let me just kind of chime in here, and it's been a minute since I've worked with that group, but so it's a cast of thousands on that board, and they're divided into committees, and so you might be on that board does a number of other things other than this charge of investigating discrimination. They're also the group that does the certifications of XPEs. And they do a couple of other things. So they have a number of committees. And so it's a committee of 3 of the, I wouldn't swear that the administrator picks them. I would think that the board, they assign them, the board, whoever's in charge of that board, whoever the chair is of those appointees, and somebody gets assigned to the contract compliance committee, somebody gets assigned to this committee, and any decision that 3-person committee makes is still appealable to the full 14-member board.
Okay.
So much
there is
bureaucracy.
backup
Good
in that.
God.
But I think some of those appointees are, if one person's not there, there's backup. So that works that way.
Do you have a follow-up question about the committee makeups?
No, I just want to make sure that we have that straight and that there's no opportunity for bias or anything else. Yeah.
Well, your question, makes me even ask a question further, Council Pierce, about the makeup of those subcommittees. For example, so would this advisement panel be, a balanced member of 3 where 2 are maybe mayoral appointees, 1 is a council appointee, or are they all council appointees, mayoral appointees, that kind of thing? I know that's getting a little bit into the weeds there, but just a thought I had when Chairwoman McCormick was asking that question.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't swear to exactly. I know that when you're working with them, a lot of times you don't know who's appointed by whom, right? So when I worked representing that agency, I didn't know who was appointed by whom. It was these 3 people did this and these 3 people. And like you said, and the check on that is that, let me back up a little bit. OEO has done most of their work outside of the city. So they are looking at employers like Whole Foods or, Kittles or something like that, and somebody filing a complaint against them. If the if the person who doesn't get the decision they want, doesn't like that 3-panel decision, they can appeal it to the full council, to the full committee, or to the full board, I'm sorry. And so there is that, like I said, that check and balance, and those employers come in with lawyers. So they come in with lawyers, and whatever the decision of the administrator and/or that 3-person committee makes, there is a check and balance. So primarily they do look at outside entities versus looking internally at the city.
Thank you,
Does that make
Council
sense?
Pierce. Do you have other questions,
I
Madam
do,
Chair?
but it looks like Counselor Bain might have a follow-up on that item.
Would you yield your time to
I would
him,
yield
and
my
I'll
time, yes.
come back to you?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Counselor Bain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Council Pierce or maybe to the Fisher Phillips team, I would appreciate some clarification or confirmation on this, because their presentation says that the advisement panel, the 3 members are appointed by the chair. Is that the chair of the advisement panel? So it would just be good to get some confirmation on that. And are those 3 members, is that a set standing panel over the term of their appointment? Does that, how exactly does that get finalized? And I don't expect an answer tonight, but that would be something that I would appreciate some confirmation on.
Thank you, Counselor Bain.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Unofficially. Yes, Madam Chairwoman, hop back in.
I'm a stats and numbers person, so when we look at the 2 graphs that you had, can you explain what the difference was from 2016 to 2017, and why we had that gap and that change in numbers? So it says, on the second graph, it says new discrimination complaints, and so, I'm trying to figure out if
it's apples to apples or apples to
right,
oranges.
are we talking about Granny Smith versus Red Delicious apples, or is it oranges and apples? Yeah.
So I can provide some background on that. So prior to probably 2008 or 2009, the Office of Equal Opportunity was in the Department of Administration, and it was part of, along with the Office of Minority and Women Business, HR, Risk Management, and Fleet Services, I think, were all part of the Department of Administration. At the change of administration, DOA broke up and parts went everywhere, and so Office of Equal Opportunity went to Office of Corporation Counsel, OMWBD became their own department, and HR went to under the controller. Those tasks were prior to them performed by just staff people. When it went to Office of Corporation Counsel, it was the administration became the lawyer, and it was a huge backlog. And so part of this is the 2009 to 2016 is a cleaning up of backlog of claims. And so, and I think there was a little bit more of aggression in handling them. There was a change in, a lot of times it's change in people, change in staff, and change in focus causes, it to fluctuate up and down. So that's why it's, 90, I think they had a backlog of 200 and something claims to clear when OCC inherited it. So the new claims, so these were, I don't know whether 2009 to 2016 may not be all new claims. It might be new claims and old claims. So I think that kind of is the difference there.
That does help. Thank you. And if I may, one more.
Absolutely, please.
On the management's role and the non-discrimination, so that slide, so the first section, second bullet, the supervisor managers are held to a high standard behavior, responsible for any harassment or discrimination that they should have known about. Can you explain that a little better? Because I would like to understand what we should have known about without being able to witness or see something. So I'm trying to get.
Hey, when there's a supervisor getting flirty with someone lower than him, you should have known that something was up. I don't know, though.
Daniel, do you want to provide a generic answer? I'll jump in with specifics.
Yeah, so under the law, the company is responsible for harassment that a supervisor or manager should have been aware of. If, again, as we mentioned, if it's not a supervisor or supervisor or manager that is allegedly engaged in the conduct, then the company, if they're not aware of it, they can't respond to it and rectify it, and they would not be held liable under the law. So if it is a supervisor or manager that sees the conduct, it is reported to them, they have a duty under the law to report it. Otherwise, the client, or I'm sorry, the entity would be liable. We can't speak specifically as to a factual situation without having, a lot more detail. And again, it's very fact intensive, but that is, our explanation of what the law provides.
Okay, so we don't have to have ESP or anything, I guess, is was sort of my thought with that, right? So, okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Other comments or questions from councilors?
Can I just provide
Absolutely. Council
a
Pierce.
couple comments?
Thank you.
I think, I don't know who it was that talked about the appointment of the administrator by the mayor. Just keep in mind that the person in charge of the Civil Rights Commission at the state is appointed by the governor, and the person in charge of the EEOC is appointed by the president. So each of these are appointed by
we
the
get that.
executive in charge of those branches. So having somebody here appointed by that mayor is not out of step with the way appointments are made at the state and federal level.
That's good.
With respect to employee complaints, I think you asked Councilor Nielsen about going to the OEO. There's no mandate on that. Employees go straight to the EEOC sometimes. The city gets lots of EEOC straight complaints. They may have already gone through HR, they may not have. So.
There we go.
So
It's good to know.
It is not mandatory to follow this. It is just the best. It's what is preferred because it's easier that way. And a lot of times they will go local just because, like she said, the EEOC just has a lot on their plate. And so a lot of times if it's not something horrible, they will just they don't have time for it. So they kind of pick and choose what they want to investigate. And but we send out plenty of, or the city sends out plenty of position statements from the EEOC or to the EEOC. So a lot of times they'll go straight to the EEOC because it's easier sometimes to do, and sometimes, like I said, the ICRC is backlogged and things like that. So, and that's all I have.
Thank you. I have a couple questions as chair, if I could. One of the pieces going back to the OEO and sort of them being tasked with reviewing the policy and procedures of the city and county to eliminate discriminatory practices. I'd be curious to know and would request that the Fisher Phillips team let us know on this committee the date, when that last review was, or if it's something that occurs regularly, or if it's a proactive approach, or if it's reactive in nature, based, on some of the situations and complaints that have been brought forth recently. I know, too, within the OEO, the administrator also gets to establish those rules and can approve the discovery practices and other things. And I guess, inherently assume the reverse is true, that the administrator can also deny investigations. Is it safe to say that that's possible as well?
Yes.
We can't speak specifically, but yes, that's inherent in any investigation. There are claims that don't have merit, that don't show that there's, compliance with the law, or untimely. There's a number of reasons why an investigation could be denied. So, I think that's just inherent, although we can't speak specifically to any circumstances that have occurred.
Yep, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to make that clear. And then a final piece, maybe for Madam Clerk, to bring to one of our next meetings would be to take a look at the OEO. We know we have 8 mayoral appointments, 6 council appointments, and just to inform us of any vacancies, if any exist currently on that piece. That would be something that I think would be germane to the work of this committee, and really in our normal roles as counselors to make sure we help fill all the vacancies that we are mandated to fill. The other thing, Danielle, the slides that you described and that Madam Chair asked about the OEO discrimination complaints and the variance due to the backlog. So thank you, Council Pierce, for describing what that historic nature of the office looked like. I do, though, sort of have concern that from 2016 to 2017, going from roughly 30 or 40 down to 8. It seems like a stark decline. And then even trending forward into the future, you discussed, federal and state complaints of this nature were up due to the pandemic and other things. And for those complaints to sort of remain pretty steady and relatively low, just seems like a red flag to me. You would think that they would be, especially, in 2020, at least 20 cases. And again, I'm just hypothesizing here, but I just want to flag for the team.
You know what? She's a fucking red flag. Didn't you allegedly cheat on your husband?
For the investigation, as Fisher Phillips looks at this, it just seems to me to be unusually low for the time that we're in. And that's
So
not
you
really
thought
a
it'd be
question, just sort of
higher?
an observation of data. I don't know, Council Pierce, if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it sits in OCC, and I will say, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus or anything like that, they have struggled with keeping enough attorneys on board, and so they've been understaffed a little bit, and so I think this has just not been, because they have that backup of you can go to either you can go to OEO or ICRC. It's a struggle to get enough staff to. Yeah, I mean, this is a one-man show, right? Okay. This is the OEO is a one person and maybe an investigator to do all of this work and to do the investigations, and so that person now has to be split with representing other departments and agencies, the way the other counselor attorneys are. 2009 to 2016, that person was sole focus was the OEO, right?
Yeah, so it's cumbersome, and it's a capacity issue.
And it's a capacity issue, and it's not like they would fall through the cracks if somebody filed a complaint. They do have an opportunity. The folks that are coming here, like we said, they can go to the ICRC or they can go to the EEOC. Right. Now, at one point in time, years ago, we were the only ones that took discrimination complaints against gender identity. So you did have to come here if you had a gender identity. But now the feds and the state do it. So there is
there's complaints on if you identify someone the wrong way? Is that what I'm hearing right now?
In the city of Indianapolis has multiple avenues to file a complaint.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to ask about that.
And then another note I had to the Fisher Phillips team is about the Burlington Industries case and some of that case law about recognition of unlawful harassment and about taking prompt action and sort of the definition of defining what is prompt. If you maybe take an action, for example, with a staff member on the campaign, but then hired them in a city or government capacity where they've reoffended, like what maybe constitutes as prompt in terms of timeline? Does it go back to is there any type of definition or best practice in terms of timeliness with regard to an employer or supervisor taking prompt action to stop and prevent future harassment?
Yeah, so as you probably will not be shocked for me to say, it varies from case to case. The prompt action is the response and actions taken in response to a complaint. So promptness does not really affect if actions or conducts have been alleged to take place over various years. What's required in order to defend yourself with this defense is that, for example, if HR of company A or public entity A learns of a complaint, they need to take reasonable efforts in order to investigate and address it. And so, how you address it is very fact dependent and, depends on the nature of what's claimed and what they find. How prompt is a reasonableness standard. So, obviously, the sooner the better. And, it just depends on the circumstances as to what was actually done, what was reported, and how things were found out.
Thank you. And I figured that would be the case. But just, I think for the edification of this committee and those members of the public watching from home, just making sure that we understand that as well. Forgive me, but I do have a couple more questions. My next one jumps forward into the management role in the non-discrimination and anti-harassment compliance. Specifically, my question is about supervisors and managers being held to that high standard of behavior and reporting harassment that they observe or know of, and being even expected to model that behavior. My question is simply, what if they don't?
Could they just get fired?
Right. I mean, that is something that somebody can allege. If they don't, then the public entity or the company, could be liable for that conduct, even if, it wasn't reported beyond that supervisor or manager. And so that is a possibility. And again, it just depends on the facts. The requirement that they model the behavior, that is more pursuant to company policy. But of course, if they engage in behavior that is unlawful, that's where it would, raise a liability for the company.
Thank you, Danielle. And I appreciate, again, Councilor Bain's earlier question about it being a mayoral appointee to the EOC and then OEO, sorry, so many letters. And then for that clarification from Council Pierce that that's how it's done sort of federally and at the state level and local level. And so that's not uncommon, but in taking a look at the understanding roles slide and reviewing, Chapter 581 and the varying sections about Corporation Counsel, about the OEO, and even the HR division and OFM, all of those sort of being administratively controlled, their executive functions, administrative functions. And so, that's sort of why we're here to take a look at that, because this isn't typically in the purview of the city county council. And so, again, just want to conclude my remarks in expressing my thanks to you all. I know we're just in phase one, and we've definitely got your work cut out for you and for the members of this committee. Just want to take a moment to hold space for any final comments or questions from members of the committee, or even the Fisher Phillips team. Max and Danielle, you've been great in fielding our questions.
If Brian Maury was here, that would have been the perfect chance for someone to ask, hey, you see the people to my right? 4 of those people got money from Thomas Cook. Should they really be on this committee? That's what should be asked right now. But you know what? I'm not going to give any crap to Josh Bain. He's there by himself. He's in the lion's den. Plus, there's plenty of time to be asking those questions later.
Let us know, too, if you online have any comments or questions as we continue to wrap up this
I already
meeting.
did. Hey, you know what? I already did ask those fucking questions, and nobody can answer them.
To our next meeting dates.
I would add just one more response to the question about, appointments by the mayor or otherwise. On slide 10 of our presentation, I just also want to remind, as Councilor Pierce noted, there are checks and balances, and one of them that we have not discussed is that there are various appeals. So if whether the responding employer or the charging party don't agree with the decision by the EEO advisory board, the Equal Opportunity Advisory Board, they can appeal to the courts. So that's another check and balance. A judge can review the decision to make sure that they agree with it as well. So I wanted to point that out.
And just for technical purposes, is that something where an individual would have to retain counsel and do that through the legal process on their own?
You do not have to retain counsel, but you would have to file an appeal. Typically, there is a response. So at every decision-making point, and I can't speak specifically to this process, we can look into that more. But typically, at every decision-making point, when there's a determination, there is a very clear notice that's given to both of the parties about what their rights are with respect to the next step. And so if they want to make that appeal, It is described in there. I don't believe an attorney is required for any appeal or filing of any sort of legal process or lawsuits, under this law.
That's good to know. Thank you, Danielle. Madam Chairwoman, I almost called you Carlino. McCormick, forgive me.
Thank you, Danielle. On that slide that you were just talking about, the third box, what is a neutral? So after hearing neutral, prepares written report, what is?
Might be a typo.
I think that is the, let me just look here real quick.
She
There
has
should be
like
panel.
at least 2 or 3 monitors. You can see in the reflection.
It's just, so, it is somebody, it's the, whoever's hearing it, it's the unbiased person
Oh, so it's not a typo.
in between. So the neutral is just the person that's gonna be hearing it.
Oh,
okay. So, does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
Ah, smarty, huh?
A hearing officer,
Yes, it's like a hearing officer type.
Hearing examiner.
Right. I don't know exactly what they call it over there, but it's like a hearing officer type.
I had that note too. Thank you.
Oh, you said it was a
That's
typo.
so good. This was wonderful and very in-depth. I think this committee will definitely take some notes home and have some thoughts. We appreciate your time tonight. To the Fisher Phillips team, members of the committee, we are scheduled to meet on Wednesday, December 4th. And just a question to the Fisher Phillips team, those couple of bullets that are still, under your work order right now, is that something that you think you'll have prepared in time for 12/4? I know we have a Thanksgiving holiday coming up and want to make sure you have ample time. The next scheduled meeting after December 4th is January 29th.
That's a long time away.
Before you answer, Danielle, sorry, not to cut her off, we are scheduling meetings, they are scheduling, and we're working with OCC to get them a meeting with both Ellen and Tawana.
Okay.
And so we've been playing kind of date tag on that, and so that won't be until, we're hoping, the 25th
Of this month, okay.
of this month. And so I think after that, we might know, Danielle, whether or not we're gonna have anything. I mean, I don't wanna waste anybody's time in coming and we don't have anything prepared. I mean, we may have to wait until after that to see whether or not we've gotten far enough along to justify having a meeting.
Thank you, Council
Does that make
Pierce.
sense, Danielle, to you?
Great, yes.
As chair, I'll stand by and I'll work with
Stand
Council
back
Pierce
and
to make
stand
sure
by.
that, we don't have a test before the homework has been completed, essentially. And seeing no other business on tonight's agenda, we are adjourned.
Well, there we go. Hold on, we got. Oh, look, nobody showed up to the meeting. Yeah, just the regular peeps. Man, that's got to be a shitty ass job. You got to be there like 7, 8 o'clock. Oh man, that sucks. So there we go, huh? Still more questions than anything. Still got a while to go. I think February is when they're supposed to have like the final detail crap of what they want to do, and we'll see how this thing goes. My gut feeling right now at this moment is this is going to be kind of a nothing burger, because right now we're just going through the process of it, and then of what they want to change, and then they're going to look into the whole Thomas Cook thing, and then they're going to say, oh, well, what should have happened was this process, actually, and then, but it didn't happen. And then what could have been done differently. I don't think anything is going to really happen to Thomas Cook. I mean, right now his name is just smeared. He's got a long way back. For sure, man. So, I'm going to ask some questions, especially that gender identity thing. That thing was kind of blowing my mind. I'm going to have to ask around on what exactly is going on with that. But it's a long video. I understand it's boring. I got to clip it real quick. If you're still watching this, Vision Zero is happening this week. Excited to see what happens with that one. And I found out there was actually the AI board was happening, but it's like 8 hours of video, man. I don't know how I'm going to handle that one. That's going to suck. But anyway, till next time.